Oh, hello, horror addicts. I'm Kristin Battestella, aka Kbatz, and tonight, my dead flowers and I, we are going to talk about romance. Yes, Gothic romance to be exact. Now, let's back up a little bit, and we will talk about some of the definitions between romance and Gothic romance. Today, when people think of romance, whether they like it or not, they tend to think of big bare-chested guys on the cover and all the bodice ripping kind of stuff, and that is what the publishing industry defines as category romance, and that as a genre has maybe been around for about 40 years or so, and things like Harlequin and Kensington. People talk about airport kind of novels. Um, and now, category romance as a genre, all the other book sales of other genres combined don't equal the sales of category romance. So, of course, the publishers, if it's not broke, they're not going to fix it. Now, I actually have some friends who write in some of the different genres, the different lines or themes they call them, Regency romance, or some of the Scottish, the Highland kind of tales. And sometimes the publishing contracts are very strict, that by a certain chapter there has to be kissing, or by so X amount of pages there has to be some sort of encounter. And then they of course have different levels. We're only talking about romance, where things can be behind closed doors or can be sweet or kind of tame. And then erotica is a whole separate issue about a heat level of the kind of sexual content. But all of these books have to have at least a happy for now, but preferably a happy ever after ending. That goes with a lot of that reader expectation. They know that readers are fickle. There's a lot of competition for books. So they want a reader to continue to, pick up all the books by that author, pick up all the similar books in the line. And they know that there is about a sort of escapism in the romance, and that readers want to have happy ending. They want to have something fulfilled. They don't want to be shocked by how the book is going to end. That'll make the reader put down the book. They won't buy anything else anymore. And it's tough. There's a competitive space on the shelf for books. That's why people turn to Kindle or their readers and Amazon sales shopping. So a great example of about how books are defined on the bookshelf is Romeo and Juliet. Now, okay, obviously it's a play. It would belong in some kind of literature or drama section. But the argument is, where would you put Romeo and Juliet on a bookshelf? Well, people say, well, it's one of the most famous love stories ever. It's a romance. It has to go in the romance section. But yeah, hello, it does not have a happy ending. People say, well, they're teenagers. It must belong in young adult. Young adult is popular now. That's why we have that genre. But they're teenagers who lie to their parents. They sneak out. They run away from home. And again, spoiler alert, they die. It doesn't belong in young adult either. So our genres and book sales that we have defined today on our shelves maybe let a lot of the great stories kind of fall through the cracks. And we see some of this parallels with horror film and television on screen today as well. Again, the slasher film is something that maybe has really only come on in the last 40 or so years. And now we are segueing onto maybe this new kind of elevated horror drama. But if you've been a fan of horror, you've known that's always been there. You've known where to find the good kind of horror movies. But now, every October, every year for Halloween, Hollywood puts out a slasher movie. And again, audiences have certain expectations. They expect to see, all kinds of kills and a high body count and enjoy the killer and all the teens getting killed, And so when people see something that's not a slasher movie, there's, again, a little bit of an audience fallout, a little bit of disappointment. And then we come into Gothic romance, because Gothic romance is not horror. They are distinct from one another. And I don't want to spend all my time talking about it, but the series Penny Dreadful, I like it. I recommend it. Even as the more you rewatched it through the 3 seasons, it had some flaws. Generally, there were some pacing issues. They had different episode number counts, 8 and 10 or 13. And there were some characters that I just really did not like. I did not like Dorian Gray. There was no sense of him being there. Justice for Angelique. Angelique deserved more. And but you had some really exceptional performances with Ava Green and Timothy Dalton. And it was a Victorian piece, and it was sort of literarily adjacent. It had characters from Dracula. It had Frankenstein. And it was just a really sophisticated kind of Gothic show. And it seemed like we were having this kind of mini Gothic revival. And the 3rd season of the show gave us something, some really great stuff. And then halfway through, it fell apart. And there was a lot of he said, she said between Showtime and the creators. And obviously, as a Victorian period piece, it had really high production costs, and there probably really just wasn't enough ratings and justifications. But then the writers pretended like that was the way they intended the show to be, even after they introduced a lot of Western themes and some mummy elements and some Jekyll and Hyde kind of storylines. And then the show just kind of fell apart. And I've written about Penny Dreadful for horroraddicts.net. And if you listen to our podcast, our current podcast season is happening now. But if you go back and listen to some of the episodes where I spoke about Penny Dreadful, I just literally scream because sometimes that's really frustrating when, we get something new that's in some kind of Gothic kind of period piece horror, and then where it kind of is really unloved and kind of falls apart and sort of self-sabotages. So sometimes it's very frustrating when you are looking for different types of horror. But one of the great things that I love about horroraddicts.net is, although I do the Frightening Flicks, I do the Frightening Flicks film and television, and also this time of year, fall, kind of Halloween, I also get a little crazy with the Kbatz crafts. So if you're interested in all kinds of spooky crafts, I do that as well. But I do Frightening Flicks, film and TV. But I'm not the only kind of movie, kind of media writer at Horror Addicts. Kieran does his odds and ends kind of pieces, and Crystal is doing her live read reviews, which are really awesome. So we get a lot of kind of mix. We've had Dave Watson, Dan Charette. Hi, Dan! We actually had some different counterpoints discussing the pros and cons about Penny Dreadful, because, again, we as horror who are looking for something else, we also have expectations too that often aren't met by just these generic kind of slasher kind of fillers. I do have a few things here that I really love that I do want to talk about, though, as well. This is The Whip and the Body. I have done some, this is a film directed by Mary Bava. I've written about Mary Bava, and if you've previously seen some of the videos that I've done, I did a video discussing all the Edgar Allan Poe material and some of the Vincent Price movies, and I did a video on some of the classic horror reading material with Jane Eyre and Dracula, Phantom of the Opera, Wuthering Heights. So they also fall in this similar vein as well. You tend to have to look back to older literature. And The Whip and the Body takes place medieval, kind of 1500s. So it's from 1963. And if there is a fault in this movie, it's that Christopher Lee is in it. But the films coming out of Italy, coming out of Europe at the time, were always dubbed. Even if you could speak English for the English audience, they were always dubbed. So you don't get to hear Christopher Lee's wonderful, awesome, booming kind of voice in this film. But obviously, with a title like The Whip and the Body, in some ways this does have a little bit of that Victorian sense that I spoke about in my Poe video, about pain and pleasure and love and sadness being sort of irrevocably intertwined with each other, to love and lost and all that kind of stuff. So here's one woman who's dating one brother, but then marries the Baron instead, and then there's death, but then there's some bodice ripping and some violence and some bruising on her body, and you're not really sure if there actually is kind of some saucy romantic counters happening, or if it's something ghostly, if it's psychological, if she's doing it to herself. So there's a really nice kind of mystery kind of element. At the same time, there's also a lot of, howling winds and billowing curtains and a castle and kind of stormy beaches and a really kind of great mood and atmosphere. And that's really kind of the difference between sort of horror and Gothic. There's actually a technicality in the definitions where today we tend to make horror that we want to outwardly really want to make people jump and really want to scare people, as opposed to sort of the definition of maybe terror, where everything is about the mood and the atmosphere and the simmering kind of nature in the sense of dread and the kind of bleakness about it. Like think back to, again, all these great Hammer Draculas and all the Christopher Lee and Frankenstein, Peter Cushing kind of movies. We're not really scared by them. What do we love about them? We love that they could show kind of maybe a little more camp than the Universal films, that they were the first to have color and lavishness and more blood and eventually sort of boobs and violence. And a lot of the Mary Bava films are that way. Black Sunday, Blood and Black Lace, they're called a giallo kind of genre, where again, the 50s and 60s, where that sort of married the kind of in-between of before were just sort of mystery, kind of noir, kind of thriller sort of movies in black and white, that were moving into a lot of color, sensational kind of violence. So they're films that sort of capture, Mary Bava's films capture a lot of the earlier mood, but they're also a little bit of a precursor to some of the later slasher movies that did come along. And I also want to discuss briefly, Kill Switch is the horroraddicts.net anthology that we have that's available now. That's all about technological horrors and some science fiction and some scary machines and things like that. But the next anthology that we're doing is called Dark Divinations. And the submission deadline for that is October 31st, Halloween, fittingly enough. And you can see I have Crimson Peak here. I think we started talking about Crimson Peak at the same time, way back in February, at the horroraddicts.net online writers conference. We had Nashin Tikasa. She's the editor of Dark Divinations, and she did several different how to submit your story and submission kind of pros and cons. And she did a chat Q&A kind of transcript, and we began talking about a lot of Victorian horror. That's the sort of theme for Dark Divinations, a lot of the spirituality and the mysticism. Sometimes, again, I think, maybe today, Halloween, things seem kind of, really ugly sometimes, or a lot of skulls and things like that, where it seems sort of a little too outlandish. And I tend to think that I like things more old-fashioned. But then we also have to remember that the Victorians were kind of strange. I talk about this also in Poe. Again, that whole kind of memento mori kind of aspect. These are people who propped up dead bodies, to take pictures of them, and carried around people's teeth or locks of hair in their lockets, or wore them as jewelry. I mean, they were kind of morbid kind of people, maybe again because they were into a lot of spirituality and mysticism, and they, it was a different era with new science and medicines, or maybe they felt closer to death or something. I don't know. So it's fascinating to look at the horror and the psychology of it. But Dark Divinations, as I said, you can find all that submission information at horroraddicts.net. And when we were talking about that at our How Writers Conference, somehow I think we ended up talking about Crimson Peak. And I think we agree that we all kind of love Crimson Peak. There's actually a newer fancy DVD version of this that's available now, special edition. And I think everybody admitted that they loved the way this movie looked. And they loved maybe the way it felt, that it did have this kind of lavish and lushness to it, and the special effects. And Guillermo del Toro, of course, directed this. And after this, which Crimson Peak was a little unloved, obviously. He went on to great acclaim, winning all kinds of awards with The Shape of Water. And I think everybody agrees they love how this looks. They love the monsters and the special effects and everything about it. The period, it takes place at the turn of the century, the turn of the 19th to the 20th century. Now, let's go back in time a little bit. And I think some folks said that, well, they were kind of disappointed in this movie, or they expected more from it. And I really think the number one problem with Crimson Peak was the marketing campaign. Now, this came out in October, and all the trailers for it were made to be, ghosts and scares, and everybody presumed, oh, hey, it's a horror movie in October where, okay, we're going to go see a scary ghost movie. And then I think people were very disappointed, saying, well, it's not scary. The ghosts were there, but, they didn't do enough. And, oh, it's just, it was creepy, but, I don't know what the brother and sister were or something. We just expected something more, and we were kind of disappointed by, it just turned out to have like some sappy things in it. And so I think the marketing, again, because people want to shoehorn things into the mainstream rather than letting them stand out for what they are, the marketing, I think, really misrepresented Crimson Peak. I think if this were actually released in February, I think people would have loved it, because I don't think people would have expected it as horror. They probably would have gone into it expecting to have some kind of period piece romance that, had something a little creepy to it. But another thing about Crimson Peak, again, if you are interested in about special effects and production and design and the costumes, everything that you ever wanted to know about Crimson Peak is in this great book that was released at the same time. That's another thing today they tend to do about movies. You have to read the book or the comic book, or there's a special video on their Twitter page that you have to watch to understand the movie, as opposed to just putting everything in the movie where it belongs. This book here has the design and the artwork and all these different, these are the character biographies, all the extra history that Guillermo del Toro had written about the characters. And of course, it's all here in this lovely kind of thing with these fold outs and all these extra pieces and artwork. This is a really great book if you love the movie, or if you're interested in filmmaking and behind the scenes material. This is a great book to have. The problem with this book, the problem with Crimson Peak, is that everything that's in this book should be what's in the movie. And I think the movie probably was shortened or was edited a certain way to fit into a maximum amount of box office viewings. Because again, it's sort of like the marketing and the campaign that people don't trust the movie to stand as it is. And so there's deleted scenes on some of the videos as well that, deserve to be in the movie. I'm trying to find a picture here. I think we also ended up talking about Tom Hiddleston, of course, during our How online conference chats. There's Tom Hiddleston there. And I do want to speak about him briefly. I really think he looks a lot like Peter Cushing. We know how I love Peter Cushing. And I'm not a Disney fan. Big shocker, right? Kbatz is not really fond of Disney. But the one thing that would lure me to Disney is if they ever did any kind of Grand Moff Tarkin series, movies, Grand Moff Tarkin, and had Tom Hiddleston as Grand Moff Tarkin, homaging to Peter Cushing. That if anybody ever wanted to make a movie about Peter Cushing, cast Tom Hiddleston, please. I know a lot of people love him because of the Marvel and all the Loki kind of things that he's doing, but if Tom Hiddleston only ever made horror movies, I would love that. That would be absolutely wonderful to me. So I do want to end here talking. I've spoken a lot about talking about Gothic and period pieces, but who says that a Gothic romance movie has to be a period piece? It doesn't. This little movie, Only Lovers Left Alive, it's directed by Jim Jarmusch. This is another thing about films today, is that a lot of films fall through the cracks, just like, the books on the bookshelf. I had to wait to see this movie. It played at some festivals, but it actually never had a really big theatrical release. So I had to wait over a year to see this movie that I really wanted to see. And Tom Hiddleston is in it, as I said, with Tilda Swinton. And John Hurt has now passed away. And of course, Antonia Helton passed away, sadly, unfortunately. But again, it's a small cast, and they're vampires. And nothing really happens. When I first wrote about this movie, I wrote about it in a vampire series of articles that I was doing. And I understand why not everybody's going to like this movie. Nothing happens. It's kind of moody. It's kind of brooding. It's kind of laid back and easygoing. And there is a reason for that. She's sort of a 1,000-year-old vampire. He's 500 or 600 years old. And they're disappointed in humans. They call them zombies because they just don't like how we're ruining our planet and wasting our lives away. And they're vampires. They see all this come and go. And she's kind of more lighthearted and hopeful. And he's sort of emo about it. And there are actually some sardonic, kind of dark, funny, witty, kind of chuckle kind of moments in it. And let me get her name, Mia Wasikowska. I spoke about her recent adaptation a few years ago of her movie version of Jane Eyre. I spoke about that in our classic reading video. She shows up to stir some trouble, but really it's just more about, a day in the life of vampires. And the more I thought about this movie, the more it stuck in my mind. I wrote a really long, extensive piece that you can read at horroraddicts.net, where I thought, basically, I think everybody should see this movie. I think everybody should give it a chance, and here's why. It's a lovely little piece, and again, it's about, it's vampires. People expect something blood and fangs and scary, and the film actually is much deeper than that. It gets into some commentary and expresses things a lot differently. And some people are probably disappointed, like, oh, vampires, and it's not scary, and there's no blood and gore, and nothing happens, and it's not all action, flying all over the place, kung fu. No, it's just actually a little quiet, introspective piece, and there's some great music moments in it that are my favorite part. So I highly recommend Only Lovers Left Alive. And I have written about Only Lovers Left Alive and Crimson Peak and Mary Bava and The Whip and the Body. Everything that we've talked about today. You can find my reading material about that at horroraddicts.net. And our Dark Divinations submission information is available as well at horroraddicts.net. And you can go back and read some of the tips and submission articles about that at the Horror Addicts Online Writers Conference. And you can listen to our podcast anytime, and check out all my zany Kbatz crafts, and you can talk about everything that we've discussed here today. We'd love to hear your opinion at our Facebook group. You can always talk to us. So I've given you a lot to watch, a lot to talk about, and I have a lot of reading to do. So I'm Kristin Battestella, Kbatz. I shall see you later. Bye. Why are you still there? Shoot.